In last session, we discussed about SQL Server cursors and how to use and what are the different types of cursors and what are the different levels that are present in the lifespan of a cursor. And in this session, we are going to discuss about SPs and functions. So stored procedures and functions. One of the important concepts in SQL Server. Before going to these two, let's talk about batches. We need to know a little bit about batch and then we can jump into the SQL Server, stored procedures and functions. Generally, a batch is nothing but collection of T-SQL statements and procedural functions. Extensions. What are these procedural extensions? You might not heard about this earlier, but we discussed about the concepts, extensions in many of the last sessions. For example, we discussed about if-else statement. So that's a procedural extension. If-else is one among the extensions. We discussed about it, but we don't know that this falls under these extension types. And the remaining parts or remaining types of extensions are begin and end statement. So this is one kind of extension, and we have while. We discussed about it already, how to use while loop, and we use this while loop while discussing about cursors in last session. And we have variables like local variables. Okay, this is one of the extensions type, and we have a return statement, which we have not discussed in last session, but this return statement plays a major role while loop is going on. For example, let's assume I have okay, let me list out all the types and then we will discuss about each and every extension type. Okay, return is one type and go to is one type, and rise error and we have wait for. So if you see these kind of things, the collection of these, any one of or all of these extensions with T-SQL statements will form a batch, and you know the batch will be ended with the statement go. Go will say that the end of the batch. Okay. Now let's see what are all the different types of procedural extensions. Let's discuss one by one, and collection of these extensions with T-SQL statements will form a batch. Okay. Now if-else statement, you know very well about this. If-else statement is used to check the condition, and if the condition is true, then some code to be executed, or condition is false, then other part of the code should be, different code should be executed. In the same way, the begin and end we discussed in the same session where we discussed about if-else. So this begin and end will help us in making more than one statement as one block. Let's say under if statement, if you have only one insert query, it will execute fine. If you have more than one, then you have to make it with the you have to specify the begin and end using these keywords. And while is used to loop through. It's for looping purpose. Mainly in cursors, we use while statement until the cursor read the data. Some code needs to be executed. If that is the functionality, then you will go for while statement. And local variables are used to define and store some some data, some value into the variable, which will be modifying throughout the batch. It is not constant, right? It's a variable. It will be varying. And the return statement, let's say for example, this is your while condition check and this is the end of while. In between, you will have some functionality. Somewhere you can have some where condition, or if, you can have some if condition, and if condition is evaluated to true, then you can return. That means it will be returned out of the looping part. That means that's the end of looping part. You can use either return or until the loop condition is evaluated to false, it will be it will come out of the while loop. Let's take an example. I want to loop through 100 numbers from 1 to 100, and in the middle, if I reach some particular condition, if the value is 75 or something like that, then you want to return. Then you can use the if condition as well as the return keyword to come out of the loop, or you have to wait until the loop completes. So that is the use of return. And go to, we discussed in last session, go to helps us to go to a particular label, and this label mostly people goes for error labeling. And rise error, generally whenever an error encountered in SQL Server, it will throw some custom error messages. But using this rise error, you can go for custom error messages. You can go for you can define your own error message, and you can publish the same. And let's discuss about this a bit more. And before going to that, let's have a little discussion on wait for. Wait for is used to set some delay. If the execution is going on continuously, and if you want to set a delay for 10 minutes or 10 seconds, you can use wait for. Okay. Now let's see the last two. Apart from last two, we discussed about the remaining procedural extension types. Let's talk about rise error first. If you observe the spelling, it is not R-A-I-S-E plus error. It is only one E. Common E for rise and error. So this is used for custom error messaging. Generally, the the simplest syntax is rise error. You can give the error number, comma, error message. Let's say I'll give the error number 50,001, and message is I am a trainer. So if you execute this thing, then 1 second. Okay, you can provide this kind of rise error on some condition check or on some batch path. So whenever you are going for some condition, like let's say referential integrity fail, you are trying to insert some data into the table where the master table is not having the particular key. Then you can write your own custom error message here. If you observe, unable to insert data into table 2 because table 1 does not have key. So you can write your custom error message. You can specify the table name so that it will be easy for the end user, or it will be easy for the developer who is debugging the code to go and fix the issue where the particular issue is. You are providing more better error message to the person who is gonna debug your code. Now it has, if you see the error number, I've given the number from 50,001, right? This is 5 lakhs one, I think. This is 50,001. So up to 50,000, it is reserved for Microsoft error messages. It is reserved for database system. After 50,001 or after 50,000, you can go for custom error message. The number that you are gonna give for this error should start from 50,001, and it can go to any number. And this is how you can go for custom error message. This is the simplest form of the custom error message. And in recent versions of SQL Server, they have added 4 different new features, and let's discuss about those features also. The first one is you can specify the security level. You can specify what level of security you want to provide, and for this one there are 3 different. One is 14. Sorry guys. The first one is severity. They have added new feature called severity. You can specify the severity of the particular error message. So all the errors are not of high severity, right? Not critical. So you can set the severity level as the second parameter. After the error number, you can specify the severity. It will be like 10. There are 4 different options: 10, 14, 15, and 16, and each one is having its own meaning. Let's say if you go for 10, it will say it's just a status message. It won't raise any error. It just provide you a status message saying that this is the whatever the message you are passing here, it will be published. That's it. It is not gonna stop the execution part. The execution will be continued, but it will give you a warning, a status message saying that this is the status, man, be careful. And if you go for 14, there will be an information icon, right? You will get an information. Okay, this is the information that uh, developer wants to provide to you guys. So it will treat the severity as just an information. And if you give the severity as 15, then it will be treated as, let's say this is information, this is a status, and this is warning. And if you go for 16, then it is critical error. So you can go for any severity level. Few cases people want to provide an information or people wants to provide an warning. If this is like this, you may face a problem in the next stored procedure or somewhere else. So you can provide the warnings here, or you can provide the error message. I mean critical error message, which will stop the execution part. Now let's see, this is the first feature where you can set the severity of the error that you are gonna raise. If you see the second feature added is dynamic error message. You can go for dynamic error message, like you can code like this: raise error. You can have text here. Unable to insert data into percentages. So if you see, I've given percentages, which means there is something which will be replaced dynamically. And after that, you can set the severity like 14, 15, or 16, whatever you want. You can set the severity level. And this is the state. You don't worry about this. And the next one here, you will pass, let's say, customer. So this value will be set to this one. So the output will be unable to insert data into, sorry, this has become something else, data into customer. So the error message, what it is going to pass is this one, unable to insert data into customer. How you can say this is a dynamic one? You can see this is static and this is static, but you are saying this is dynamic errors, dynamic error message. So this is not a dynamic, right? You can make it dynamic with the help of a variable. Declare table name as varchar of 100. You can have one error message and you can use this. I have to go for @ as this is a variable, and you can use this guy here. So whatever the name that you are going to assign to the table name variable, it will be tagged to this. This will become a dynamic error message, right? So this is one extra feature they added in the recent versions of SQL Server. So this is pretty useful one, and you'll come to know once we started using these error messages. And the third one is you can store the messages. You can store the messages in the database and you can get it back. Where the database, where the messages will be stored, where the error messages will be stored. You can go to the system table, sys.messages. Here in this, you can see this is a view actually. This is not a table. This is a view on top of the table. Okay. You can see message ID, the language ID, the severity, and is event log and warning or text. What is the text it has to show? Query not allowed in wait for, incorrect syntax near, percentage, and is something. Order by items must appear in the select list if the statement contains union. So all these error messages, whatever you get normally, whenever you write something wrong in the syntax or in the query, then it will go and get the fetch. It will fetch the error message from here and display the same. So you can see there are more columns in the insert statements of the value specified in the values class. So this is pretty common one. We face this many times. If you have 10 columns in your table and if you are passing only three columns values, then it will throw this error. So it will get here, it will get the error message. All the error messages are predefined. Okay. And it will make use of the stored error messages, and it is having up to 35,012, and it can have up to 50,000. After 50,000 we can make use of the error number. Now let's see how to add a new message to this database system. Okay. So to add a new message, you have to make use of the stored procedure, system stored procedure, sp underscore add message. And here you have to specify, you can specify a lot of options. You can see that message number, severity, and the third one is message text, fourth one is language, fifth one is with log, and so on. You can see it clearly, right? What are the parameters that it will accept. So it depends on your wish. I am passing 50,001 as the message number, and I'm going for severity as level 16, and I'm going for text, that is, this is my first error message. Okay. And language system and all those things you can use, you can write, I mean, you can make use of it. On which language? For example, if I'm going for English, if my system is set to language English, that is USA English or UK English, then the language ID will be 1033. I can set it or I can leave it. I mean, these are the minimum parameters that I have to set for the sp underscore add message. And for everything, if you observe, there is a default value. So if you don't set also, it will be taken as the default value will be taken. Now let me execute this guy. Is not official one, so let me remove this guy. So I'm passing only 3 parameters, and it is saying the command executed successfully. And if I try to execute this, you can see the error message is stored here. The default one 1033, severity is 16, remaining value, this is also default to 0, and you can see this guy, this is my first error message. So this is how you can store that, and you can use the same in your rise error. You can use the number 50001 as this guy. And now let me try to give some value which is less than 550,000. I am giving 5,001. User defined error message must have an ID greater than 50,000. Okay. And if you observe this guy, this particular error message is having a number 15040. I can search for it. Where? What are the columns? 15040, right? What are the columns present? Message ID. Message ID is equal to 15040. There are so many. See here, this is what we are getting. User defined error message must have an ID greater than 50,000. And the same error message is there for different languages. You can see this is one language, this is one language, this is one language, this is one language, and so on. So this is how you can store an error message and you can make use of it again and again. If you want to modify this error message, let's say this is your error message, right? If you want to modify the same error message, there is one more parameter that you have to pass, that is @replace. So I'm giving replace as the value. If you specify this, then it will be replaced. Now I have not replaced anything. I'm removing the message part here. At the end, I'm executing the same, and let's see whether it will be replaced or not. If you want to modify, this is the only way you can modify the stored error message. You can see execute sp underscore add message, number is there, language ID, severity is there, and the message is changed to the new one. Why? Because I passed the extra parameter, that is @replace is equal to replace. If the value is replaced, then it will be replaced. If you want to just insert, then don't need to provide this one, just leave it. If you remove this particular guy, it will insert a new one. So this is how you can. And if you want to drop or delete, I can say, instead of drop, if you want to delete the error message, there is another stored procedure, system stored procedure, that is drop message. What you have to give is just give the error number. If there are more than one error, that is the same error message for different languages. I have showed you the error message 15040 is there for different languages. If it is there for different languages, you can provide the language number also, which language error message you want to delete. I don't have the it for different languages, so I deleted it by passing the value just error message number. and you can see the particular error message what we have created is deleted. So this is how you can go for error messages. Now if you see, I executed this one, whatever I created earlier, okay, declare and so on, and it is showing unable to insert data into. I'm asking the table name to be set here in the @ percentage, but the table name I'm not assigning any value, so it is showing null. Okay, the level I have set it to 16, the state is 1 and the line is 2. This is the second line, right? And now let me set the value. Set @ table name is equal to Rupesh. Now the table name is Rupesh. Let me show you how the error message will be shown. Unable to insert data into Rupesh. That's why you can make the error message as dynamic one, right? And let's see one more thing. Rise error. I'm gonna pass. Let me insert at least one error message. I'm gonna call this error message. If you see, it's saying incorrect syntax near this one, so I have to pass different values for this. Let me comment it out for now. Okay, unable to insert the data into the error message. The new feature, we discussed about 3 features for now, up to now. That is one, setting the severity, and the next one is dynamic error message, and the third one is stored error messages. Now let's see the last one, that is logging part. You can log this. You can log this particular error message. For that, you don't need to do anything. You have to specify with log. So if you specify with log at the end, what will happen is it will be logged into the event viewer. What is meant by event viewer and where you can see that? To see the event viewer, just go to the control panel, and under that you will find administrative tools. Yeah, here it is. And under that you will find event viewer. So it will be logged here. Let's see whether it is logged or not. It is taking time to load all the logs events that are occurred in this one. So you just try it out. If your system is having very less, then it will open in very short span of time. Just go to the event viewer and check the system and application level logs, and you will find it, the log whatever we have logged using the error messages here. And this is the path how you have to go. Just go there, and as we have very less time, I'm going to the next step. Okay. Well, we discussed about so many procedural extensions like if and so on. And let's see an example for wait for also. Wait for, delay. You can specify the delay in milliseconds or hours, however you want. So what will happen is, let's say you have some select statements before this or some statements, and here some statements. First, this statement will be executed, and then it will wait for this long. Whatever the delay you are specifying here, it will wait for this much delay, and then it will go to the next one. So this wait for is used to set some delay. Instead of continuously proceeding to the next step, let's say you have 100 statements and you want to set some delay in the middle, then you can go for wait for keyword in the SQL Server. And apart from this, we also have try and catch. And this is very well known why we use this try and catch. This is the main purpose of this try and catch is to catch the errors. With earlier sessions, we discussed about @ error to capture the errors that are occurring in the transactions. Now this try and catch plays a major role in stored process, and whenever you are using transactions, this try and catch plays a major role. The syntax looks like this. Begin try, and somewhere you have to end the try. After that, begin catch and end catch. So in the middle, you can have some functionality like you can begin some transaction, have some statements, and finally commit transaction. So if everything goes fine, if this transaction is executing fine, then it will be committed and the entry will be completed. If any error occurred in the statements that is given in the transaction, let me set some space and properly align it. It looks like this. Generally, if you align it properly, begin try, begin catch. So the begin try will come to end try if no error occurred in this transaction. If any error occurred, then it will catch it immediately. So in this catch, we can go for rollback transaction. So that means nothing will be committed. Everything will be rolled back. The statements that are present in this one will be rolled back. Let's see an example, a simple example here. Let's see whether I have any tables in the MSBI, which is very short and simple. Let me take, employee with primary key. I'll take this. I need a primary key table 1. Select star from employee with primary key. Let's see what is the data that is present in this one. And you can see 1, 2, 3, 4 is there. Employee ID is the primary key for this table. Now what I'm going to do here is insert into employee with the primary key values up to 4 it is there. I'll give 5. I'll give Rupesh and I'll give PL and I'll give IT, the same value. And I'm inserting one more that is with 6 and inserting one more with 5 again. So this is an error. This will cause an error, right? If everything goes smooth, then it will commit the transaction and I'm printing success. If anything goes wrong, then it has to go to the catch and roll back the transaction and it has to print failure. So this is just an example to show you what will happen with the begin and try and catch. So first it will come in. If I execute this one, it will come in, it will go to the transaction, it will check this and it will insert this first record, second record. While inserting the third record, the primary key constraint fails. So immediately it will come to the catch part. So why? Because a try catched an error there. There is an error. So it will come to the catch and it will start executing the part that is present in the catch. So if I execute the same, now you can see the first it is the select statement that is returning and you can see it is failure. And if I execute the select statement, these 3 records will not be there for sure. Why? Because it is rolled back. It came to the catch and it rolled back the transaction. If you have any queries, let me execute the same again. You can see these 4 records affected is the output of the select statement and 1 record affected is the output of the first insert. 1 record affected is the second, output of the second insert, and the third insert encountered an error and immediately it will be jumped to begin catch and here it rollbacks the transaction and failure will be printed. Earlier when we were discussing about the transactions, we were in the dilemma how to commit or how to roll back, which one to take, and it can give you can give only one end here. If you give begin, you can give only either commit or roll back. We discussed like that only. You might have this doubt, but no one asked me. So this is how you can make use of commit and rollback using the try and catch, or you can go for if statement also using @error message. If there is any error for every record, if it is @, you have to check for every record. After inserting this record, you have to check if @error is not equal to 0, then roll back. So this is not the ideal way, right? This is not the best way. You have to, for every statement, you have to go for this. So instead of that, you can go for the try catch block, which will reduce the coding and also the coding looks clean and easy to maintain. Now let's discuss about a little bit about temp table and table variable. So what is meant by temporary table and what is meant by table variable. Whenever you need a table to store the data temporarily, then you can go for either temporary table or table variable. So generally, if you want to store the data permanently, you will go for physical table. If you want to store the data temporarily, for execution, when the some set of procedures are executing, and as part of the functionality, you need to hold the data into a temporary table for a temporary purpose. It's not a permanent one. Then you will go for the temporary tables or table variables. These temporary tables are of two types. One is local and another one is global. So both acts in the same way. There is nothing much difference. The only differences are the local table will have a suffix hash sign. For the global, it will be double hash. If you create a table with single hash, it will be treated as local temporary table, and if it is double hash, it will be global temporary variable. And what will be the syntax of this? There is nothing much difference. It's just like creating a table. Create table hash testing id integer. I'm defining it. Name worker. So that's it. Is there any difference between creating a normal table and this one? You don't find anything except the naming convention. I have missed something. Worker I have not given the size. Let me give 100. Now the temporary table is created. Okay. And if I execute this using select star from hash testing, you'll get the data. But if you see this database, you won't find that stuff. You won't find the table hash temp anywhere. The table is not created in this database. You can see it is not created anywhere. Now let's see how to create a global variable. I'm going for a double hash and executing it, and the table created successfully, and selecting the same with a double hash. You can see both are fetching. So that means you are giving the same name for different local and global variables. Where these tables will be stored? It is not stored in the database. Then where these tables will be stored? These tables will be stored in the TempDB database. That is one of the use of master databases, TempDB. Select name from tempdb dot dbo dot objects. So if I execute this, sys objects, I think it's not objects. So it will give you all the table objects that are present in the particular table, particular database, and you can see hash testing and hash testing is there. Why it is accepting the same name? Generally, it has to throw some conflict, right? Whenever you define a temporary table name, it will suffix, suffix something. If you see for this hash testing, this is local temporary variable. It has some underscore 000. The name is pretty big. You can see 000 blah blah blah. It will give some unique name. Even though the name that is server is using to create the table in the temp database is different, but when you access with the same name, whatever you have used while creating, it will go and fetch the data from here. That's the beauty of it. It will be stored with a different name, but still it will get the same data from the same table. If you refer it with hash testing, whatever the name you have given. But for global variables, it will be the same name. Now, let's see the difference between local and global temporary tables. So the local temporary table, the first thing is, the difference is syntax. It will start with hash, and this guy will double hash. And the second one is, the local one will be available until this session is there. If I close this session, that's it, it is gone. This session or a particular batch, or if it is in the stored procedure, if it is created in a stored procedure, once the stored procedure is completed, then it will be gone. So the scope is the major difference. But global variable is a different story. If I create it here and if it is being accessed by 10 different sessions, it will wait, it will be present, it will be available until the last session is closed. It will be available till the last session is closed. And now you can easily understand why the hash testing is taken as is, whereas hash testing, it has taken a unique name, different name. Why? Because hash testing is used by so many guys by from different connections. So if it gives some unique name like this, then you can't get it, right? You can't. The other users can't know if server is providing a unique name for global temporary table also. So the global temporary table will have the same name whatever you have provided, but the local temporary table will be having a unique name. It will be taken by it's purely in the code of SQL server, and it will decide what name it has to give, and it will be like very awkward name what you are seeing in the screen now. Now, generally you don't need to alter these tables. You may go for dropping the table. How to drop the table? Just like dropping a table. Drop table testing and drop table hashes testing. So now you can execute the query and you can see no hash stuff will be present in this one. Why? Because both the things are dropped by me. So this is how you can create the local table, local temporary tables and global temporary tables. And the difference is mainly the syntax. The second one is the name with which it is storing in the TempDB database. And the third one is the scope of the local and global temporary tables. Now let's see the table variable. So table variable is also a similar one. It is just like a temporary table, and people says that temporary table variable will be created in different place, but temporary table will be created in TempDB. Nothing like that. Both will be stored in the same database. But the major difference between the temp table and the table variable is syntax. The first thing, this is declared as a variable. Table variable is declared as a variable. I mean, just like how you declare the variables. Declare, I have to provide the name, table name, one. Let's say I'll give one. The spelling is wrong. Table, and you have to specify the columns here. You can specify columns like ID, the first one, integer, and you can define primary key if you want, if you wish to. It's purely depends on your wish. And the next one is name, varchar 100. So this is a table. I declared a table variable now. You can see this is just like declaring a variable. Declare at the rate testing test1 or something as integer. So this is the data type, and here it is the data type. It is a table data type, and these are the columns that are present in the table data type. And after declaring this, you can just insert the data, like insert into, and inserting the table data into the temp table is also same as inserting the data into the normal select table. How you will do in normal table? Insert into table name, values, and so on. In the same way, for inserting the data into the temporary table, you have to go for insert into hash, the name of the temporary table, values, and so on. There is no difference between inserting the data into a physical normal table and the temporary table. And here insert into at the table name 1, and you have to specify the columns, or you can just leave it, values 1, Rupesh. This is how you can insert the data into the table variable. And if you want to select the data, select star from at the rate table 1. So here I'm declaring it, I'm inserting it and selecting it. You can see it's just a variable. And the scope of this variable, table variable, is just like local variable. It won't be available after the session is closed. For example, let me take the select statement in a different scope. I'm going to here, and it is I'm executing select star from table 1 at the rate of table name 1. It is saying must declare the table variable table name 1. Until that particular batch is available, this particular table will be available. This is how you can go for the temporary table, and you don't need to drop it. Once the session is closed, automatically it will be gone. That's it. It is a variable. You know about the variables, right? You don't need to worry much about the variables. There are a couple of differences. People will be asking why you want to go for temporary table instead of table variable and so on. This table variable is a beautiful option if you have a data like only 100 records or 200 records max. If it is huge data, then better go for temporary tables. That's the first and foremost one. And um, using temporary table, for example, you still remember this query, I guess. Select star into hash testing and from which database I'm in. I'm in MSBI, right? Employee info. So what this guy will do? This guy will create a temporary variable, temporary table with this name and pulls the data from employee info to this particular table. This is just like normal table, our normal table creation, backup table creation. I explained you in the basics when we discussed about SQL Server basics. Now you can see you can create a temporary table in this fashion, but you cannot create the table variable in this fashion. This is one difference, right? And the other difference is I already explained. This table variable is for small data, whereas temporary table is for huge data. And these table variables cannot be created in the functions. That's one disadvantage of using table variable. And the next difference is, for example, in table variable, the one which you are seeing on the screen, does not allow foreign keys, check constraints, and other things. It allows only primary key and default and nulls and unique constraints. Only 4, and it won't allow the foreign key and so on. But temporary tables will allow all these stuff. And these guys cannot be used in the triggers or foreign keys. So these are having very limited advantages when compared to temporary table, and it's always better to go for temporary table. But remember, whenever you define a temporary table, make sure you will close it. If it is not a stored procedure, it's always better to close the temporary table. Now here I created a temporary table using this select star into part, right? Now I have not yet dropped it. If I go and select it anywhere, this will be available until the session is open. Now when I try to create one more with the same name, let me go here. With the same name, if I try to create, it will say there is already an object. If I go for global variable, it will be fine. Why? Because it will take a different naming conventions. So you have to, whenever you create a temporary table, make sure you will drop the temporary table, or else it will occupy a lot of memory if the data is used, and hence it decreases the performance. So this is completely about temporary tables and types of temporary tables and the table variables and the difference between these two. The major differences is, whenever you are going for huge data, go for temporary table, or for small data, go for table variable. And in temporary table, you can go for indexes, whereas in table variable, you can't go for indexes. In temporary table, you can go for foreign keys. In table variable, you can't go for foreign keys. And temporary tables can be used in functions, but not the table variables. And you have differences like select star into works fine for temporary table, but not for table variable. So you might get this question, why all the shit he is discussing instead of going for SPs and functions? And he has given the title as SPs and functions, but he is not discussing about these two stuff. This is just because whatever we discussed till now, all these things can be used in SPs and functions. Generally, all these features or functions, whatever we discussed till now, will make a stored procedure a big one. That's it. The difference between small stored procedure and the big one is, if you use all this stuff as per the requirements, then even a small stored procedure will become a big one if you try to achieve the requirement by using all these procedure extensions and temporary tables and so on. Let's start with stored procedures now. Stored procedures are nothing but special kind of batch where you will be having select statements, TSQL statements and procedural extensions. And this is pre-compiled form of data. Like this is a the pre-compiled form of a stored procedure is stored in the database. This is a server-side coding, and it will be stored in the database and used whenever it is required. That means compilation once, and execution again and again and again. So whenever you execute a select statement, what it will happen is select star from employee info where employee ID is equal to 2. So if you execute this by selecting this display execution estimated execution plan, it will show the execution plan and it will create the execution plan whenever I execute this. And under messages, you can see one row affected. And instead of this, I'll do one thing. You can see include actual execution plan, right? I'm checking this and I'm executing this guy. So it will return the result and it will also include the execution plan. So the execution plan will be created whenever you execute a query, right? In the same, it will take some time for creating this execution plan. It is not an easy task. It will create so many combinations and it will find the best one. So this stored process, the execution plan will be created at the time of compilation, that is once, and every time it will use the same copy again and again. So until you modify the stored procedure. So people, that is one advantage of using stored process. It's a pre-compiled code, already ready to use, right? No structure, nothing, no execution plan will be created on the fly. Whenever you execute it, it will be already created and stored. Let's see the syntax for the same. Create procedure and name of the procedure, and if you want to define any parameters, you can define it. @param and the data type, and if you want to set any default value, you can set the default value, and if you want to set it as output, you can set it as output. I'll explain each and everything here. With you can set different options, like you can set recompile, or where is the other option? I can't see that. Okay, here it is. Or you can go for encryption, or you can go for run as, execute as. Execute as some user. So you can go for any of these options. This is not a mandatory one. The with part is there, right? That is not a mandatory one. You can go for it as some batch. Batch means collection of SQL statements and procedural constraints. I can say begin and end. In between, you can go for whatever you wish to. So if you see, let's take a simple example. Create procedure. I'll name it as get data. It's not date, it's data. I'm not giving any parameters. I'm going for a simple one, and I'm not going for with recompilation and all, as select star from employee underscore info. So what I'm doing is I'm creating a simple stored procedure with the name get data, which helps me in pulling the records from the employee info. So if I execute it, it is compiled. Now let me call this. How to call a stored procedure? You can call a stored procedure using execute stored procedure name, and you can see the stored procedure. Whenever I call the stored procedure here, okay, you can see it is going in and preparing the data, executing the select statement and getting the data, displaying the data here in the output result. So this is a simple stored procedure. And if you want to see what is the data that you are having inside that, let's say I don't have this functionality written for the stored procedure. To see the data, you can make use of sp underscore help text and the stored procedure name. It will give you what is the functionality or the data that is present for this text for this stored procedure. Once you get this, you can make modifications. You can alter the same by going for one simple change, that is alter. Instead of create, alter procedure name as, you can go for the stuff, and here you can modify whatever you wish to. Let's say I'll set for employee ID is equal to 4. This is the one I want to alter. So if I execute it, the stored procedure is altered now. If I execute the stored procedure now, it will get me only the employee ID is equal to 4. And let's come back to the syntax. You can see this part and you can see this part. I've given very simple in the begin and end. I have given only one simple select statement. You can make use of try, while, cursors, everything. You can make use of everything and you can play with that. You can make a simple stored procedure is a pretty big one. Okay. And this parameter, let's discuss about these parameters now. And let me give you a brief about this with keyword. The recompile means whenever it executes, it will recompile the execution plan. If you wish to create the execution plan, recompilation every time. What I said, it will be compiled once and it will be executed again and again. If you want to compile every time whenever it executes, then you have to check this. Then, and it is not suggestible to go for recompile. And encryption is well known to you. It will be code will be encrypted, okay, which everyone cannot be understand. And executed as user means a particular user. Whenever the stored procedure is executed, it will be executed as a particular username. Generally, if only one user has rights, so then they will give that user details here. Execute as this particular user. Now, let's see a simple stored procedure with one parameter. Create procedure, get data with key, okay, and the parameter is @employee ID, and I'm giving integer as the parameter name. As I'll give the same select statement. Instead of 4, I'm giving @employee ID. So if you see here, I've declared one parameter. I can keep it in brackets, parentheses if you wish to. And this as best practices go with begin and end. Okay. Now create procedure get data with key @employee ID is the parameter I'm passing and data type is integer. Now I created this stored procedure. Let me execute this guy. Execute get data with key, and if I execute this, it is saying procedure or function get data with key expects parameter employee ID, but I'm not passing it. So what I have to do is I have to pass the employee ID. What is the ID I want to pass? I want to pass 4, and you can see it is retrieving the data for 4. If I pass 1, it will retrieve the data for 1. If I pass 2, it will get the data for 2. So this is how it works, the parameter. You can make the query or you can make the functionality dynamic one. So that's the advantage of using parameters. Now, what if I don't want to pass the value always? That means if I want to set a default value, then you can simply set it by setting equal to 5 with key default. I'll name it as like this. So create procedure get data with key default employee ID integer and the value I'm passing is 5. So I executed this. Now let me execute this stored procedure without passing any value. If I don't pass any value, it will take the default value whatever I have set. This is called as default value. This is the property called default to the parameter. So employee ID 5. If I don't pass anything, if I pass 6, it will be overridden. The 6 will be passed. If I pass 7, if I pass 7 ID will be passed, and there is no data for this, and hence it is retrieving 0 records. Now with more default, let's say I have employee ID, comma, I'm passing one more parameter, that is @name, which means it will take 2 parameters inside, and one parameter it will have default value, so you don't need to pass, but the second one is having name varchar, which is not having default, so you have to pass the value. For example, let me pass 4, comma, Lukesh. I think this is the name I have. I don't remember it. Let me check that. So yeah, correct. If you see, this is the ID I have passed and this is the name. And I set this ID as default, right? If I don't pass this ID, it has to take default, right? But if I execute this now, it is saying error. Why? Because error converting data type varchar to int. Man, this is having default value and name I'm passing, then what's the problem? The sequence is the problem. The first one is ID. Even though it is not, it is having default value, you cannot pass like this. If you want to pass only the other value, then you have to specify at the rate of name is equal to location. Why? Because you are not passing the other value, so and so. Still it is returning the data. Why? Because I have not added the AND part here. So the condition is not checking. This is an example to show different parameters in the stored procedure. You can have n number of parameters like this. There is no such restriction. Like generally, you won't get scenario where you will pass 1,000 parameters, right? Then hardly will be passing 10 parameters max. As far as my experience is concerned, I have created pretty big stored procedures, which is of 10 pages or 15 pages, but taking only 5 to 10 parameters into the same. Similar to the temporary tables, local temporary table and global temporary table, you can create stored procedures locally and local stored procedure and global stored procedure, which no one uses generally. If you add one hash, then it will be a local stored procedure. If you add double hash, it will become a global stored procedure, will be stored in the temporary DB. The advantage of this stored procedure is if you want to execute something on the fly for a particular procedure, then you can use it. But this is the very rarely used one. Everyone wish to have a permanent stored procedure, or they'll go for a coding part. They will not have the temporary stored procedure, and that is why people never discuss, or even you won't get questions about is it possible to create a local stored procedure and global temporary stored procedure. No one gets the questions like that. Why? Because it's not being used by any, but still it is possible. You can create the same stuff. Now let's discuss about output parameters in the stored procedure. Output parameters, generally it retrieves the data. It returns the data to the calling environment. Calling environment means for this particular stored procedure, whatever we have created, this is the calling environment. From where you are calling, this is the calling environment, and this is the stored procedure functionality. So this guy, if you go for output parameters, it will return the value to the calling environment. Let's see an example for the same. I'm creating a procedure. I'll name it as calling environment, calling env. Just dummy name. Don't worry whether don't worry much about the namings here. And I'm taking a parameter at the rate count. I'll name it as int, and I'm making it as output. Make sure you'll set it as output. You have to set it as output, then only you can pass the value. You can return the value to the calling environment. So what I'm gonna give here is select at the rate count is equal to count of star from a table name. Let's say employee info. So what this guy will do is this guy will get the count of records from the table name employee info, and it will assign the value to the count. Okay. Let me execute this, which I have defined as output variable. Now, how to call this? How to get this value? To get this value, first you have to declare at the rate some value. Let's say I'll give it as total rows. Okay, as integer. I've defined one value. Now I'm executing the stored procedure. This is the calling environment, right? I'm executing the stored procedure. The stored procedure name is calling environment, and I'm passing the value at the rate of count is the stored procedure. At the rate of count is the variable name, right? At the rate of count is equal to at the rate of total rows output. You have to specify like this. So what I'm doing here is I'm defining a total rows variable, and I'm assigning this one to the count, and this count will go in, it will calculate, it will assign, the value will be assigned back to the same one. Let's see whether it is working or not, whether it is returning or not. So I have to see, right? But so I'm printing the same output. You can see this is called, and from here this is assigned, and this total rows is assigned to count. Count is going to count, calculated the number of rows and return the value, and the value is printed, and the total number of rows is 8. So this is how you can call call uh, you can define an output variable which you can call from the calling environment and get a value back to the calling environment. So this is how you can go for the calling, output variable. Now I'll make it as 1. I'll declare one more parameter, employee ID, integer, okay, and the same functionality where employee ID is equal to @ of employee ID. So this is a new stored procedure, and I'm going for 1. Here what I have to do is I have to pass the value of for employee ID also, right? The other variable. So I'm passing employee ID as 5 and the count as so and so. Now how many records will be written? Only one, only one record will be written, and the count will become 1. Why? Because I'm passing 5 to this query. Where employee ID is equal to 5, I have only one record. Then one record count is just 1. So it is passing to this count. The count is passing to total rows. Total rows is printing here. This is how you can go for output variable parameters in stored procedure. And now let's see how to alter the stored procedure. Alter procedure, procedure name, and the functionality. If you don't know the functionality, again the same stuff. Go to help text, execute this particular, provide the stored procedure name. You will get this guy. Copy this and go to alter and modify whatever you want. Here you can modify, or you can add, you can remove, you can do so much of stuff. If you want to drop it, drop procedure, provide the name of the stored procedure. So this is how you can drop it. Now one is dropped. Let me drop the other one too. I've dropped the calling environment too. I have so many other stored procedures, right? I can drop it in the same fashion. And this is about stored procedures. And you may have the question, man, we have seen lot of complex stored procedures, but you explained about only few simple things. What about complex stored procedures? So complex stored procedures, the difference between complex and simple stored procedures is functionality. So in this functionality, I've used only one select statement. What you are going to do is as part of your complex stored procedures, you are going to have more than the one functionality. Sorry, more than simple functionality. Like you'll be getting data from one table, loading, creating one temporary table, loading into the temporary table, and then reading the data from the temporary table and apply group by and loading into a different temporary table, and that's it. If you have the plan properly, what you need to do, if you have the requirement properly, then you can create by taking the help of the items we discussed in this particular session, like temporary tables, try catch blocks, transactions, and so on. So that's it about the stored procedures. Now let me go back to this execute data. I don't know whether this is still present or not. Yeah, this is still present. So let me take this ISP underscore help text. So whenever I execute, I can see the number of rows affected here, right? Generally, even that one, people feel that it takes a lot of, performance issue. It will calculate what are all the affected rows. So for everything, it has to take the count and it has to print it. So people will go for some keyword. No count on. So if you execute this, oh sorry, I think it is set. So let me set this no count on. So what will be the difference between these two is if I execute this stored procedure now, you can see that no count will be coming. The count will not come. So people think that this will improve the performance of the stored procedure. This will take less time. So this is pretty simple select statement which is pulling only one record. So it may not take much time for getting the output. If you have a pretty complex stored procedure with 10 pages of functionality, then obviously this set no count on will be helpful. So keep in mind this set no count on is one of the tip that people uses to improve the performance of the stored procedures. And there are a couple of other things like using proper functionality. And whenever you are using a select in the table, in the stored procedure, they don't go for star. Instead of that, they will specify what are all the columns they want. As per the analysis, select star is it takes more time than the select column names. And they don't define the temporary tables and they don't keep it open. So they'll define temporary tables and they don't keep it open for longer period. And if they don't need any temporary table, they will close it immediately. And there are so many other things like that. Instead of using cursor, they'll go for update statements or delete statements. There are many other stuff which will improve the performance. Just you can browse it, and it may take a lot of time if you jump into the performance part of the SQL Server. So this is about the stored procedures, and now let's discuss about the functions. Functions and stored procedures are special type of batches, as I told you, and we call it as routines. Routines means it will be compiled once and it will be executed again and again. Now let's see the function syntax. So create function name, whatever the name you want to give, and similar to that parameters. Here you will have return. This is the major difference between stored procedure and function. Returns, you have to select data type, whatever the data type you want to return, and you have two options with encryption or schema binding. Okay, as and select statements like begin and end, just like in stored procedure. If you see create function name, the spelling is wrong, that's why it is showing error. function, okay, name and parameters returns data type. This is the major one. What type of data you want to return? I want to return an integer type of data or varchar. You can specify that. Okay. With encryption means it will be encrypted. The code will be encrypted, and the schema binding is a different one. Schema binding, if you have 10 tables used in this one or 10 views used in this particular function, if you set it to schema binding, then none of the tables can be modified. Okay. The schema of the tables cannot be modified until you remove or you modify this function schema binding option. Okay. As begin and end, you can have the functionality of your wish. Let's say I'll show you a simple example. Create function extra data is the name of the function, and I'll pass one parameter. Okay, the parameter name is @name. Data type is varchar of, let's say, 100. I'm passing one parameter. Returns varchar of 150. Let's say this is what I want to return. Now what I'm gonna write as part of the functionality is I'm directly returning. So return statement is used to return the data to the calling environment. This is used only in functions. In functions, we have to, I set the return type to varchar of 150, right? So I have to return the same. Before that, I'm declaring a variable @ variable varchar of 150 I'm taking. Okay. So whatever the value I'm gonna get here through the name, observe this very carefully, to the parameter, I'm modifying it to varchar. Varchar is equal to @name plus is a employee. So what I'm doing, I'm taking the name and assigning the variable value with the name parameter and concatenating some value. I'm returning the same @var. Okay. If you observe this carefully, let me execute this first. As declared, one second. So this is the syntax. Actually, the begin and by mistake I've given that. So if you see what I'm doing as part of this functions functionality is I'm creating a function. I'm passing a name from calling environment, and I'm concatenating the name with is a employee. An employee should be the correct one, but I have given wrong syntax. Is an employee actually. So the output, if I pass Rupesh, the output will be whatever it is gonna return is Rupesh is an employee. If I pass Lokesh, Lokesh is an employee. When I is an employee. So this is what it is gonna return. This function is gonna return. Now let's see how to call this function. This function can be called from select statement, insert statement, and so on, or delete and update wherever you want. Where condition, you can use it in where condition. Let me show a simple example. Employee ID from employee info, and instead of name, okay, let's say this is my name. What it will return? It will return me ID and name. The third one, I'm calling the function. The function is extra data. This is the function name, and I have to pass some value, right? I'm passing a variable name. And if I execute this now, oops, yeah. While calling a function, you have to provide the schema name. The schema name is DBO, database objects. Remember this. This is especially for functions. While calling the function, you have to provide the schema name, that is DBO here in our case. So what it will happen is the name Rupesh in the first row will be passed to this name and to this function, and it will concatenate is the employee to that and return the same, and it is showing the same. So this is the use of function. You can use it anywhere, okay, and even you can use it in where condition. Extra DBO dot extra function, extra data, and you can pass name is equal to Rupesh is a employee. So it will check and it will get only that record which is having Rupesh is employee. So you can use it in where condition, and you can use it in where condition delete part. Let me tell you an example. If the sales is XYZ, and you can go for average of the sales, and in delete condition, delete start from records, delete from table name where sales is average is greater than or equal to some amount, you can provide that amount. So in short, the functions can be used in select list, or for it can be used in where conditions, deletes, updates, insert, just like system functions, whatever we discussed in our earlier sessions. We discussed about date time, that is a function, system defined function, system functions, okay, or built-in functions. So these are user defined functions. User is defining the functionality of his wish. So this is about function creation. And for both the stored procedure and functions, if you see, I have taken very simple examples. You can go for very complex examples, and it always depends on the requirement. When the requirement is pretty complex, obviously the function, if you go step by step, line by line, you can create complex stored procedures and functions by using the same concepts whatever we discussed in today's session. Now this is called scalar functions. You are returning only one value. You can have a table valued one. Okay, this is the one which we discussed is scalar one. Now let's see how to return a table. Create function, table fun is the name. I'm not passing anything. Okay, returns table. Okay, and then begin, end. In between the begin and end, I'm giving return. You know, right? Return statement should be given to return the value. Generally, if it is a scalar value, you will pass like this: return of the variable or return of some hard-coded text. Here I'm taking select star from employee underscore info. I'm directly returning a table. So let me execute this function. Create function, function name returns table. Yes, okay. So the problem is if you don't have anything, it needs to be passed like this. A return statement with a return value cannot be used in this statement. Incorrect syntax near begin. So if you see select function and the function name returns is table, I'm returning a table, and directly I don't need to specify anything. Why? I mean, you can have functionality. What I'm doing here is I'm returning a table that is employee info. Now if you see, I can call this function just like a select statement, select star from, as you know, you have to specify the DBO table function, and there is no parameters, right? If you execute this, what it will do, it will go get the data. And in the same way, you can have some parameter. Employee ID, I'll give it as employee ID and integer. And in the select statement, I'm taking where employee ID is equal to @ of employee ID. So I'll name it as table function 1. So it will return the table, but the problem, but the extra thing is by passing some value. If I select 1 here, it will throw error. Why? Because it will expect a variable. It will expect a parameter. So I'm not passed any parameter, right? So if I pass 4, it will take the 4 in and it will execute and it will return the data. If I pass 5, in the same way, it will be executed. So this is how you can return the table value as part of the function. I mean, by using the function, by executing the function. And if that is the case, you can use the function as a table in the select statement. So this is the advantage of having the table value function. And the beauty of this one is when you are returning a table, okay, you can use apply. Apply to join with another table. Let's say employee underscore info, I'm joining with this table on, I'll make it as cross apply. If you see, these two guys are applied. That is, cross join is apply in the sense, if you, what is the use of apply keyword? This may be the question you will get in interviews. So apply keyword is used to join the table valued function output with a table. Okay, let me give it as A and give it as B and execute this guy. It is getting the data, and I can go for outer apply. A dot on A dot employee ID is equal to B dot employee ID. Oops. I think this is not on. Let me check that. I'll get back to you on this. I mean, I've never used this apply, but generally this apply is used to join the function output with a table output. And you can go for cross apply or simply an apply, or you can go for outer apply. So let's see this. I've never tried that. Yeah, this is not on. This is where I set the where condition here, and you can see it is like outer apply. It checks and it will get the condition where employee ID is equal to so on. So I mean, if the function is returning a table, there should be a functionality to join the table with the another table, right? So this apply will do the job for you instead of joins. So this is about functions and stored procedures. And if you see the differences, the major difference is function returns a single value. It can return only single value, whereas stored procedure it can return, cannot return, and it can return more than one select statement, or it cannot return anything. It depends on the requirement. If your requirement is just to update the table, then you won't return anything in the stored procedure. But in the function, you have to return at least one value, either a scalar value or a table value. And the functions, you can use apply to join the outputs, and in the stored procedures, you have to go for some open query or link servers and so on to do the same job. So to put an end to the, before ending the session, I just want to tell you one thing. Even though the examples we discussed here are pretty simple one, still it has taken 1.5 hours or so. Why? Because it's a huge concept. What I suggest you guys is to go through, I mean, set some functionality in your mind. Like, don't set the functionality like retrieving 10 records or 15 records. Get the 10 records and load into the temporary table and modify the temporary table, and then load the table data into the another temporary table, right? Try catch blocks and try to catch the errors, use transactions and everything, and make a big stored procedure and functions, and practice like that. Don't practice with a simple select statement, just like I explained you in this particular session. And if you have any questions, you can always post to me. I'll reply to your mails immediately. Why? Because I mean, if I take a complex examples here, it will be like 3 hours or 4 hour session. It is not possible to cover everything in one session. So, but my intention is to cover all this stuff, and I've spent a lot of time on explaining the procedural extensions, which are very important, which will be used. Let's see, for example, this is a store procedure, right? We have taken one store procedure, create procedure name with parameters as, and in begin and end, you can have a begin try and begin catch, and try and end catch. You can have a begin transaction. You can have a temporary table creation, or you can have a variable declaration. You can declare hundreds of variables. Okay, so all this stuff, it just in your hands. It all depends on how you practice the stuff. Okay, if you see the stored procedure, there will be so many stored procedures, and if I go to this modify, I don't know whether yeah, I have an access here. This is the basic one. Sorry, this is the basic definition, and you can see these are the parameters he is setting, and here he is declaring a variable. He has declared so many variables, and he is calling some other stored procedure, and this stored procedure is having an output parameter, that is red code, that is assigning to red code, and he is using if conditions to red code so and so, and then he is using one more check if condition. See, all these things will make it as a big one, and if you see, you will not find anything more than variable declaration and if else statements, if begin end, if begin end, if begin end, and so on, and rise error, which we discussed. You can see, and this is how you can make a simple store, I mean complex stored procedure. There is nothing called a complex stored procedure type. It always depends on the functionality what you are working on. If your manager asks you, or if your client asks you to return 10 records from a table, then you cannot write a complex stored procedure for that. That will be a simple one. If your client asks, provided a complex functionality, then obviously it will go, and the stored procedure will go for some pages, right? So don't think in that perspective that stored procedures we are writing only simple stored procedures. It's when the time comes and you're just using, this is the label. I explained you about label, right? This is the label. This label will be calling from somewhere. See, here you can see go to undo. So this is how go to one stored procedure like this and analyze it and try to write complex stored procedure. Inside a stored procedure, they're calling another stored procedure. They can do that. So this is how you have to practice. Don't practice with the same examples that I've shown in the videos. Just go and unleash yourself and try with the big and complex functionality. Set some functionality in your mind and draw the graph how it has to go, and then start working on it. So all the best for you guys, and there will be only one session pending on SQL Server Advanced Concept, that is SQL Server Indexes, which is useful for performance tuning, and we will cover it in the next session. That's it for today's session, and practice it and post the questions if you have any. Thank you guys.